What we're going to focus on next is we'll be using our child theme to modify the backend portion of the website. We'll begin by personalizing our login page. Customizing your WordPress site's login page has various benefits. In addition to visual enhancements, you can add features to improve the user experience and website security. We will do this by adding custom CSS and some PHP to our functions file. Let's take a look. Currently, this is what my login page looks like. We're going to transform the page so that it looks like this. We'll be using our custom logo. We're going to create a unique background image, and we're going to use colors that are more indicative for our website. Let's jump in and see how we can accomplish this with our child theme. We'll begin by going into our functions page, and we're going to enqueue a new style sheet. I prefer to keep my admin styles separate from styles that are going to affect the web page. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a new folder within my child theme. I'm going to call this CSS, and then I'll create a new file inside of that, and I'm going to call this customlogin.css. Just so that we can ensure that our style sheet is working, I'm going to make a rule on the body, and we'll just set the background color to something bright so that we can immediately tell if our CSS is working once we enqueue it. I'll go into my functions file, and I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and I'll make a comment. And we'll be using the same method that we've used in the past, where we'll go ahead and enqueue the new styles. I'm going to create a function called custom login styles. I'll use my WP enqueue style. Rephrase. I'll use the WP enqueue style. I'll go ahead and pass in the parameters of custom login. We'll use the get style sheet directory URI, and then I'm going to place the path for our custom CSS. Then we'll use the add action hook so that we can go ahead and load these particular files into our website. If we save this and go back to the front end and refresh our page, we should see that the background is red. So we know that this is being enqueued properly. I'll go ahead and get rid of this as I don't want the background color to be red. And now we can use CSS to modify the page. One thing that I do want to point out is that if we look at the code for our login page, the login body has a class of login. I don't really need to use this since my CSS will reside in a separate file, but just to keep things very clear, I'm going to use this class to target the body of this page. I'll use a selector of body.login. I'll go ahead and specify the background color, and I'm going to use a shade that we are using elsewhere. We're going to be using this dark blue. This is going to be my fallback content, just in case there are any issues. Ultimately, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the background image property so that I can load an image that I want to repeat. So I'll use URL. It is worth mentioning that I've already created an images folder inside of my child theme, and I've placed the images that I'm going to be using for this section of the course inside of the images folder. So I'm going to go ahead and use .. to go up a level. I'll go into my images folder, and we're going to use this bg1.png. If we save our page right now and go back to the front end portion of WordPress and refresh our screen, you can see that we're using this background color of the dark blue, and there is this scale pattern that is appearing on top of it. My background image is an image that I've prepared that will seamlessly tile. I have white scales, and I've dropped the opacity down on that graphic so that it's about a 25% opacity of white. I don't want this to be overly bright, so I decided to use something with a lower opacity. But honestly, you can use any sort of image here that you want. Now, instead of using a solid background color, I am going to go ahead and use a comma here, and I'll use the linear gradient property. And I'll be creating a gradient that goes from that dark blue shade to the lighter shade of blue that we're using elsewhere within our project. If we save now and recheck this in the browser, you can see that we get this nice gradient that is going to really dress up the page. Now that I have the background set, I'm going to address some of the other issues on the page. The first thing I want to do here is I want to replace the WordPress logo with my company's logo. I'll also alter the login box slightly. I'm going to make sure that the colors match the color palette that I'm using on my website. And then this text down here is obviously very difficult to read. So we are going to update this to be a different color. And we are going to change the verbiage of this text as well. In addition, the WordPress logo currently links to wordpress.org. I am going to replace this and have it link to the front end portion of our website. In order to do these things, we will need to not only modify some of our custom CSS, but we'll also need to add some additional code to our functions file. Let's go back to the functions.php. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can set up a function so we can change the message at the top of the login page. Currently, WordPress just displays the WordPress logo, but we can also alter this and write our own custom message. Ultimately, I am not going to utilize this, but it is helpful, so I want to show you how to do it in case it's something that you will want to incorporate into your project. I'm going to set up a new function. I'll call this custom login message, and I'll use return to create an H2. I'm passing in some CSS, and we are going to use the get blog info name to display the site title. So this is going to dynamically get the title from whatever we named our website when we set up WordPress. We're using a filter hook right here, which is hooking into the login message, and this will allow WordPress to place this at the top of our login form. If I save this and we go back to the front end portion of WordPress, you can see that now it says Mar. So whatever I named my website, when I actually set up the website, will dynamically come in. As I mentioned before, I don't want this to say Mar because my logo is going to say Mar, so I will remove this. But in some situations, this could be helpful for you to incorporate into your project. I'll go ahead and delete this text, and we'll move on to the next thing that we want to add to our login page. The next item that I want to do is I want to add my own custom logo to the top portion of the login page. In order to do this, the first thing we need to do is we need to remove the default WordPress logo. In order to do that, I'm creating a function called remove WordPress logo admin bar, and we are going to pass in a parameter, which is the WP admin bar object. This represents the WordPress admin toolbar. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use the WP admin bar dash greater than remove node line of code, which will remove the WordPress logo. We're going to use an action hook, which is going to run the function when WordPress actually builds the admin bar. This 999 priority ensures that this runs after WordPress adds the logo so that it can be removed. The other thing that I need to do here is I need to go ahead and remove the WordPress link that's at the top of the page and make the link go to my front end homepage. We'll do that next. This next block of code right here is going to change the URL of the WordPress login logo, and it's going to redirect users to our homepage instead of to wordpress.org. We're creating a custom function called custom login URL. We're using return to return the home URL of our WordPress site. and we're going to use a filter to hook into the login header URL, which is what controls the logo link on the WordPress login page. We'll be replacing that with our custom login function, which is getting our website's homepage. If we save this page now and look at our website and refresh, you can see how our custom title has gone away. And if we click the link right here, it's going to take us to our front end of the website. So that part is working well. In order to replace this image right here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use some CSS. As you can see, this is currently an H1 that has a link inside of it, and the logo is being generated via CSS. So in order for us to change this, we're going to use CSS as well. I'll go into my custom login.css and let's go ahead and add the code that we need. I'll add the comment at the top so I can be reminded as to why I have that CSS. And this is the CSS that I'm going to be using. I'm using login h1a, and I'm using a group selector with SVG path. The background image is going to be our MAR logo. So I'm going into my images directory and I'm getting that logo. The background size is going to use inherit. And then I have some margin on the bottom. I've defined a width and a height, and I'm using a background size of contain. If we save this now and return to the front end portion of the site and refresh, you can see that now the logo is our MAR logo. And obviously, if I click this, it would take the user to the front end portion of the website. Let's address the login box right here. I'm going to make the background color somewhat transparent, and I'm going to round the corners and add a drop shadow and adjust some of the colors that are being used inside of this box. Let's start off by addressing the login box. This is the form element itself, so I'm going to use a class of login space form. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to change the background color to a 70% white. I'm adding a border radius of 10, and I'm adding a box shadow of a 60% black. Next up, I'm going to style the actual login button. I'm using a descendant selector of WP Core UI space button primary. I'm setting the background color to our light blue, and I'm adding a box shadow of the darker blue that we're using throughout our website. Next, I'm going to change the little eyeball color that allows the user to see or hide the password. This is going to use class selectors of dash icons visibility before and dash icons hidden before, and we're simply going to set the color to our lighter blue. Let's save our page and take a look in the front end. If I refresh the page now, you can see that this is starting to be styled in the way that we want. Obviously, we have some custom CSS that is allowing this to better match the branding of our website. As you can see, my button has a hover style. We did not code that right now, but that is something that we had coded previously. So if I go ahead and select my input element, you can see that we have a button primary hover, which is setting the background color, the border color, and the text color. This is something that is being controlled by the front end portion of the website, but this is inheriting into the admin section or the login page, as you can see right here. So this is already working perfectly. I don't have to augment that. Now what we'll do is we'll address this text right here. Obviously this text is difficult to read, so we want to change the color. And I'm also going to show you how we can change what this text says. Instead of saying lost your password, we're going to write something different. In order to do that, we'll have to add some code to our functions file. I'll go back to my functions file and let's just add a comment here. We're going to create a new function called custom lost password text. And then we are passing in a variable of text. We're using a conditional statement here. And what we're doing here is we're seeing if the variable of text equals lost your password. If that is true, we're going to return forgot password, we can help. If not, the function is going to return to the original text. It's going to be left unchanged. And we're going to use our filter hook so that we can go ahead and replace the get text with the custom lost password text. Let's go ahead and save this. And before we look at it in the browser, I'm going to change the CSS a little bit so that the color is easier for us to see. We're just going to go ahead and make the color white. The first rule that I have is .login hash back to blog A, and I'm combining this with a .login nav A. These are the two elements that are showing on the screen, and I'm changing the text color to white. I'm using those same selectors, and I've added the hover pseudo class, and I'm changing the color to a very light blue. If we save and go back to our browser, you can see that now the message says forgot password, we can help. If we hover over, it's displaying with our custom light blue. And then we have our link that takes us back to the MAR homepage, which is the same link that we're using up here on the actual logo. This is now looking pretty good. I like the way that my login screen is much more customized. We can obviously still utilize this in the exact same way. And you can see if I click the visibility off, we can see what the password is. I can click login, and this will take us to the login section of our website. There is one more element that we want to modify, so I'm going to log back out. And you can see it says you are now logged out. So I would also like to revamp this particular element. If we inspect the element, we can find out exactly what is controlling it. So you can see we have this div with an ID of login message. That's what's actually controlling this. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to copy this rule right here. We'll go back into our CSS and we'll make a comment, and then I'm going to actually just paste in the original CSS selector. So you can see we have login message, login notice, login success. I'm going to change the border left to use the colors that we're currently using in our website. We'll change this to our teal blue. I am also going to change the background color, and I'm going to be using this light blue instead of white. And I'm going to add a slight border radius. We'll just make that 6 pixels. We don't need the word wrap break word because it's inheriting that. I am going to change the margin settings. So we're just going to get rid of this, and we'll use margin top and bottom of 1em. Right and left can simply be auto. I don't need the padding. It could just inherit from the original rule. So if we save this now and go back to the front end portion of WordPress and refresh our screen, you can see that now this is slightly rounded. The blue bar matches our blue. And it looks like our margin on the top is maybe not working. So let's just find out what's going on there. Oh, and actually you can see that I forgot to put my semicolon. So it's ignoring this, but if we add that back in, we should be able to see this. And now that I see this, I might want to drop the opacity down on this element as well. So let me add my semicolon so that this rule works. And let's go ahead and set the background color to something with a slight opacity. I'll use the same color, but I'm just going to drop the opacity down to 60%. Let's save this one more time. And if we refresh this now, you can see that it is displaying in the way that we coded it. And actually, now that I see this, I don't really love this teal color. So maybe we'll just change that to the same white. But I did want to show you that you could alter that if necessary. And let's make the margin on the top and the bottom slightly larger. All right, I think that looks much better. And as you can see, customizing the login screen really allows you to add a little additional polish to your website. It helps to represent your brand and create a more engaging experience. I love doing these little extra touches to my WordPress website because I feel that your website is just that much more impactful. And it really does help to showcase your brand more prominently. And overall, it should improve the user experience.